Gordon, thank you for your patience.
No worries.
Can you hear us? All right. Só preciso de poder ouvi-lo, pessoal. All right, guys. Good morning to the people on the other side of the world. Good evening to our guest, the legendary Gordon Henderson, and good afternoon to the folks in the North America side or audience. Thank you, DJ Vasco, who took us back in time, playing all these Exile One tracks, and also, plenty of Kanas, Lipso, Zouk, of course, and DJ Vasco is going to be back after this interview, and he's going to make us travel all the way. I know a lot of you guys are in extremely cold places, and Vasco is going to take us back to the Caribbean, where it's always warm, sunny, and looks like there's never a worry in life. So Gordon, welcome, and again, thank you for your patience. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks a lot for having me, man. I'm thrilled.
It's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure and an honor. It's a privilege. We're starting this year in a big bang by having you here. Huge pleasure. And of as we discussed previously, one of the main goals of this interview is to bridge the gap in our knowledge basis as far as what we know pertaining to Kizomba. Of course, this page where we're streaming this is called the University of Kizomba, and most it's people who are primarily interested in Kizomba music, right? And of course, Kizomba music drew a lot of inspiration, amongst others, in the Caribbean, in the Zouks, in the Compas, in the I want to use this opportunity as the first of hopefully many opportunities where we're going to talk about it and, bridge this gap and get these two oceans, or these two parts of the world much closer, right? So first thing that I want to ask you, have you ever, before I approached you, have you ever heard the word Kizomba pertaining to a music genre?
Can you say that again?
Okay, I said, yeah, guys, is the mic okay? Good. Is it sound okay? Okay. I said before I approached you, right? Was there ever a time in your life before I approached you that you had heard the word Kizomba pertaining to a music genre?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I have a friend in Dominica, and a few years ago introduced me to Kizomba.
Uh-huh.
And then I did some research and noticed that Kizomba represented Angola in a big way. And I'm amazed at the way that the marketing of the genre was done across the world. And what fascinates me most is the elaborate way that the dance aspect is being handled. It's so artistic, sexy, and it is something by itself. And this explains and probably justifies our little conversation, because it's a matter of anthropology.
Yes.
Know how things,
Yes.
It's like 360. Something began in Africa, moved across the ocean, came back and evolved. It's fantastic, fantastic.
Exactly. So when you heard, the music, even if it was for 5 seconds, 10, 15 seconds, did it strike you like, hold on a second, this sounds extremely familiar to me? Did it strike a chord?
Well, not necessarily familiar, but I could identify with it.
Okay.
I could distinguish factors that were, let's say, from the continent. I could distinguish what could be called modern pop, and at the same time, I could identify.
Okay, okay. So you felt, it's fair to say that you felt at home when you heard it.
Perfectly at home.
Speaking of home,
The only thing, don't challenge me to dance it. The moves, man, the moves.
man,
I have to learn the moves.
You are Caribbean man. You must have rhythm. You must have rhythm. It's part of your.
Rhythm wouldn't be a problem. I'll dance in time.
It must be. It must be.
Moves.
It must be in your DNA for sure. So you speaking of home. So you were born in Dominica. I think a lot of people usually when we heard Zouk and Caribbean rhythms, especially from this part of the world and the people who consume them, we tend almost automatically to associate with Martinique and Guadeloupe, right? So you're actually born in Dominica, right? What were your initial, your very first inspiration as far as the artistic side, the music side? What drove you from, instead of being, a normal, 9 to 5 guy, what was the initial trigger from the artistic side?
Okay, first let me quickly say that Dominica is an island which is located between Martinique and Guadeloupe, and these two islands are 20 nautical miles away from Dominica. And notice I pronounce it Dominica with the accent on the first syllable and not Dominica. Not to be confused with the Dominican Republic.
Republic, yes.
So these islands, neighbors, are so close that you can literally see Martinique from one end of Dominica and see Waterloo. So we are that close.
Okay.
When I grew up in Dominica, there were many musical influences which came through radio, because Dominica at the time of my growing up had a population, which might surprise you, of about 40,000. That's the entire country. So, and I have been to villages on the African continent where the population is way over that, villages.
Yes.
So you imagine, so our link with the outside was radio. And through radio, we listened to a wide variety of music from the United States, music from England, music from the more developed islands of the Caribbean like Trinidad and Jamaica. And that's what really inspired me to get into that field. I'll give you a quick story of what made perhaps a definitive decision to go into music when I was a teenager. I was in a private high school, an American high school, run by religious brothers. We call them brothers, something like priests. And my interest in music probably was not appreciated by the principal of the high school. And he told a classmate, you should not waste your time with guitar playing guys like Gordon Henderson. And when my classmate told me so, I decided, well, okay, I will do the academics, but I'll prove to myself and to that clown of a brother that guitar playing can go beyond just strumming away and entertainment. It can be trade, it can be industry, it can be art, and most of all, culture.
Yeah. at that time when you're growing up, because I don't know exactly, from a societal standpoint how it is in that part of the world, but here, in most African countries, our parents, our principals at school, they will all incentivize us to be, engineers, lawyers, economists, the regular corporate type of things, because there's this perception that is what going to give you, job stability for life, and you're going to be able to make a living. And it's almost like the artistic side is never fostered and it's never truly respected. So sometimes we lose a lot of talent from young age, because coming from home, the parents, the older siblings, not only they don't, how do I put it? Like, instead of them galvanizing you, they actually put you down. Like, what do you think you're going to be? You think you're going to be able to raise a family by being a musician? At that time, was there that perception, when you're growing up, that being a musician was almost associated with, a bohemian person that maybe wasn't too good at school and wasn't good enough to be a 9 to 5, corporate guy?
Well, you have said it correctly. The perception was identical. Being an artist, well, one would be because you can't do anything else. Your intellectual capacity would be reduced, or you are retarded in some way in terms of your intellect.
Yes.
So that is one. Number two, you are lazy and not very ambitious.
Yes.
Another factor was because people knew that Nat King Cole and James Brown and Frank Sinatra were famous, but they thought that this was something of the West, something from outside. And I remember a very good friend of mine who is considered an intellectual and an inspirational speaker today. I remember telling him in high school that I wanted to make a career out of music. And he told me, boy, you have big ideas, which means you're crazy. It's a euphemism for you're nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so this is my learning from the African side to the Caribbean side. Is that a Caribbean expression of saying you must be crazy?
Yeah. Or you have big ideas.
All right. So at some point, you made a bold move. You were part of a group called Voltaire 4. Was it Voltaire 4 or Voltaire 4?
4.
Voltaire 4, because you guys speak English in Dominica, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, you had your group, and you made a bold move to leave for a couple of years everything that you had already established in Dominica. So you had a stable life, you had a work, so you could make a living at that point by doing your regular job, daily job, and maybe do a few gigs over the weekend. But you took a bold step and you go to Guadeloupe to be part of the Vikings, right? And you were invited to be the Anglophone singer for that band. So a lot of some of your friends, not only family and relatives, but also the people who were on the artistic side of you, decided to stay back, correct? So what propelled you to make such a bold move and risk the stable life that you had in Dominica and go to Guadeloupe, kind of taking a chance with Vikings?
Well, I made many moves to Waterloo, back and forth. And as I said earlier, it's pretty close. It's like 15 minutes by air. And one day an opportunity came. I was in Guadeloupe. I wasn't really there for music, but an old friend who was a singer, the Creole singer in Les Vikings. Now they have a French name, the Vikings. Les Vikings, his name is Ipomen. he told me that someone wanted to do a recording. At that time, I had not done any recordings. And the person wanted someone to write the lyrics and sing a song, and if I wanted the job. I jumped on the opportunity. I went to the studio, and it happened to be the musicians from Levy King who were the musicians. In those days, everyone recorded at once. It was not multi-track. So the bands were recorded with the singer and everyone. And I recorded the song, and the band was so impressed by what we did, and they asked me if I wanted a job. Of course, I accepted, and that was a new chapter in my life.
Okay, so you're coming from you already had an identity as a musician when you're on your home island, part of Voltaire 4. So you go to Viking. What were the similarity of what Levy King were making in terms of music versus what you were already bringing with you in your luggage as a musician? What were the similarities, and what was the things that for you was contrasting, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, well, there were similarities and we may say differences. Le Viking was typically a dance band. And the population of Guadeloupe afforded the opportunity of having the band work like 3 or 4 times a week, like say Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Another thing is people in Guadeloupe and Martinique danced a lot, particularly during the summer months, in day and night. So it was not only, so musicians of popular bands, there were 2 popular bands in Guadeloupe, a band called Typical Combo on the other side of the island. And I say the island, but just quickly for geography's sake, Guadeloupe is in fact 2 distinct islands that look like a butterfly. So there is one side called Grand Terre, the other one called Basse. Viking was on the Grand Terre side, and they worked like 3-4 times day and night a week. So that was a distinct difference from my Dominica, where we would be doing mostly stage shows like concerts and maybe dances for young people, but Viking catered for the entire population, and they had a wide variety of music, imported music. So they played salsa, and they played. This explains why they had a singer who sang French and Creole, but mainly Creole. One who did Spanish, although later I discovered that the Spanish singer didn't know anything about Spanish, so he just, copied by ear whatever he thought was Spanish, but it passed very well because the audience themselves couldn't tell the difference. And so they were happy to have me, who was Anglophone, English speaking.
Yeah. Okay. So was it fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that at that point, this influential band, like Levy King, you guys realized that in that part of the world, there was need to make perhaps 2 subgenres of music for people to listen to, but also dance music, stuff that you can dance with another person, right? So you had the more individual dancing, sort of carnival oriented music, probably as an influence from the bigger islands like Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. and you guys realized that maybe there was a need to make music, for people to dance together, in addition to the music genres that was already being made. Was there a conscious realization and then started to making music to cater for both sides, or was it almost accidental?
No, I think that happened eventually. But when I met Levy King, they were essentially a dance band, period.
Okay, okay.
But the repertoire for a dance band was very varied. Varied in tempo, varied in the style of music, the genres of music, and maybe 80% of the music originated, and this is where I discovered Haitian music for the very first time. So 75 to 80% of the music played by all the bands in Martinique, Guadeloupe, and French Guyana, which are the French overseas department, with Haitian music. There is a local type of music called Begin in Guadeloupe and Martinique. Martinique has the mazurka. They played some of that, but it was not the favorite of the audience.
Okay.
And I dare say it was not their favorite dance music pattern either.
Okay.
So they played Haitian music.
Haitian music. Okay.
Yeah, to make people dance. And punctuated that with a little salsa, a little rock steady or ska, as it was called then, before the word reggae came about, and a little soul music, and that's where I came in. Not even calypso, soul.
So that's very, I think that's, for me, that's the first big learning that whoever is watching this should take. It's an accurate statement to saying Guadeloupe, French Guiana, and Martinique, the bands, as you said, the overwhelming majority of the bands were playing what was essentially Haitian music sprinkled with flavors of the local island music. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So was there at that point already synthesization or hybridization, if you will, of different music genres?
No.
So they'll pick compa, right, from Haiti, and they would already synthesize with something different, or was were they playing as pure as possible to compa?
No. Permit me to interrupt you. There was
go ahead.
Synthesis, no fusion. At that time, the collective narrative was to respect genres. And there was also another parochial view that this is my music, this is Martinique's music, this is Jamaica's music. So the idea of fusion was not the paradigm of the moment.
Very powerful point. So at that point, when we with Vikings, one of the members, Pierre-Edouard Decimus, ended up eventually forming Kassav years later. And I want to touch on that in a moment. You had, a fairly successful time or stint with Viking, but in 1973, so you arrived in Guadeloupe in 1973, you decided to leave and form your own band called Exile One, right? Was there you felt that maybe you reached your plateau with Levy King, or was just Gordon being Gordon and wanting to push and try for something else, something different, taking it, always striving to take it to the next level? What was the main, drive for you to leave a fairly stable, fairly, you're doing good with Levy King, and then you decided to go and venture out and do your own thing with Exile One?
Well, this is a very good question, because when I founded Exile One, for a while I had Exile One and I worked with Viking at the same time. But the main motivation is because I sang these soul songs, Otis Redding and Joe Tex and that sort of thing. The leading producer on Guadeloupe at the time, Debs, the Debs label, wanted to try, because I have been bugging, or I had been bugging Debs for a long time, that I would like to do some recordings. Once he recorded me and gave me the entire master for free, and he told me he doesn't think he could sell that music. So I encouraged him to try a single. So we tried a single titled Love, which is available on YouTube. And it worked beyond his expectations.
Mm-hmm.
It was all over the Caribbean. It went to South America, Suriname in particular. Suriname was a colony of Holland then, and it became somewhat of a mini hit in Holland. So Debs was fascinated by the success. He invited me to do a second one, which was not varied in topic, because the first one was love, and I titled the second one Pain of Love. So there was not a lot of variety at that level. And that became a hit. And Debs told me, well, what you've been wanting for so long, you want an album, let's do the album.
Okay.
But there I told him I did not want to do it with Levy King, because Levy King was not specialized in soul music. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
They played a little bit of soul, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but their preferred music was Haitian music, which was called at the time either compa, cadence rampa, or compa direct. There were always two twin words.
Understood. So basically it was out of need, and also the fact that, you know, Henry Debs, which probably the biggest producer of all time of Caribbean music. So the main drive was that you guys felt that maybe you had outweigh the scope and the reach of Levy King for the type of music that you really wanted to do. All right.
Exactly. And let me quickly tell you.
Go ahead.
He was adamant about that I shouldn't sing in Creole at all, because I always had an interest in Creole music. But my first language, and I spoke Creole, but he thought that my Creole had an Anglo accent that would not be acceptable, one. And two, he had these big dreams of making probably the first Rihanna. And what I mean by that is producing American style music in the Caribbean and penetrating, crossing over to mainstream, as they say, in the industry. So he didn't want me to sing Creole at all.
So, and that's the question which I actually had prepared for you, which is, and I'm glad you touched upon this. Do you think that your biggest hits that you had that propelled you to, you know, leave the Viking and then go into Exile One, if they were in Creole, would have had the penetrating impact that they had in across, you know, South America, Suriname, and also you mentioned Holland? Do you think that you had, if you had not sung in English, you'd have had that reach?
No, with that style of music, doing it in Creole would probably have no impact at all.
Okay. So it's, you know, we kind of have the same issue sometimes here when people sing in our local, African languages. It's almost like for many artists, they feel like they reach a plateau, a ceiling, unless they started singing in a language that the European markets can understand and can actually consume. So I just want you to draw your attention to that parallel, because often here we have exactly the same issue. If we were to sing in our quote unquote African Creoles, a lot of songs will never go that far. So we can definitely relate to that. So with Exile One, what type of music, when you're making, you're very soul music oriented, because your time in Dominica with Voltaire
Four.
four was very, I'm divided between quatre and four for some reason, maybe because of the French Voltaire. So you are very, at that time, you're very soul oriented, right? So when you start making all these hits, did you have a conscious decision? What music genre am I going to make? Because I want you to touch upon, when you start making, you had Cadence Rampa or Compas Direct, which was impacting the whole of all those islands. At some point, you decide to come up with this new thing called Cadence Lipso. Tell us a little bit more where that came from, what the influences were, and what was your vision going forward? Why not going with the comfort zone of Cadence Rampa?
Okay. Well, first of all, I should tell you that, and this, this might be a very strong statement, but these insular genres, be it compas direct, be it reggae, or even calypso, from a Trinidad standpoint, when other islands attempt to play these genres, they always come up with something which is an approximation. It is never exactly the same. You can always distinguish that this is not Jamaican. It sounds very much like Jamaican. Yeah. You can always grow your locks and do a lot of gimmicks, but a Jamaican will notice immediately. So for example, and it's important why I want to elaborate on that particular question before I really answer. Bands in Guadeloupe, I remember I told you that Guadeloupe are in fact two islands. Mm-hmm. Those on the non-Viking side, the other island, these bands used to model themselves on Latin bands, salsa bands.
Okay.
And they never had what we call the drum set. They had timbales or timbills, I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's not a drum set, the conventional drum set that you'd see a rock band or a reggae band. So when they played their compa, it had a distinguished feel and sound to it.
Yeah.
That was almost the case with Les Vikings.
Okay.
Now,
okay.
Cadence Lipso is something that happened by sheer accident.
Okay.
But it opened my eyes in particular to self-awareness in a big way. And I will tell you, the first album that we did with Exile One, which was basically soul music and Afro pop at the time, there was a band called Osibisa, where a large number of the members came from Ghana. I think they were based in London. We were influenced by these bands, Earth, Wind and Fire and Osibisa, because it was the period of Black Power, so we're looking towards Africa for inspiration and that sort of thing. That album became a mini hit in the region, in Guadeloupe, and a dance promoter, not concert, a dance promoter saw us perform at a club. Now, I say it's a whole series of coincidences that's notable. He saw us at a club. He knew it was a hit on the radio. He was impressed and he decided to invite us to perform at a dance in Paris, France.
Okay.
So we came and we performed all these funky songs and so on. And the people applauded, but they didn't dance. First of all, they didn't dance on that kind of music. They danced on compa. That's what they danced on. So after an hour or so, the promoter came to my ear, being the band leader, and told me, you must do something about it because the people wouldn't be that tolerant for much longer.
So get your act together and make music that my crowd can dance, pretty much.
Indeed. So I told the guys, you know what? These people, they like compa. We are calypso, which is pretty close. Let us creolize the repertoire, which is very simple. I remember being invited to a university in the United States, and I told them that story in a musicology class, and they told me that's impossible. I don't know. Yeah, I know, because I've worked with so many different types of African musicians. Because of the many influences that we have traditional influences, we have our own pop influences, and we play with so many different people from necessity, from the love of it. It is easy to turn something. You can take the same song, it's reggae, reggae, and then you can switch it into high life or move it into anything. So practically, any Black musician from the continent or the Caribbean is intrinsically versatile in this respect.
Okay.
You know, I would put my hands in fire for that. So we did it, and the people started to shout and wail, and this is where Kadasipso was born. And I should add, there was a record producer, and when he saw and heard that, he immediately offered me a record contract. Now, when I went to his office, I told him, well, I was just trying to save the day by fooling around, you know, doing this. And you see the hand actions I make is typically Haitian.
Okay.
Before calypso, you would be playing on the hi-hat.
Yeah.
Other forms of music, but playing continuously on the cymbals. This was Asian. So that was one of the aspects that made the success of Calypso. The guy, I told the guy I was fooling around and I don't want to record that. I remember Debs telling me our big plan of going international. I want to do it in English. He said, no, don't you see that, etc. After a lot of argument, he decided to pay me double and do 2 albums.
Wow.
One in English with the trajectory that we had in mind, and the other one with which I decided to name Cadence Lipso. It could have been Compa Lipso,
Okay,
because to
okay.
me, Cadence Rampa
Was
and
compa.
Compa, they may have differences, but the differences are so subtle.
Okay, okay,
Maybe
okay.
Haitian musicians might see them as being greatly different.
Mm-hmm.
But for the untrained ear, it's practically the same
It's
thing. So I
the
found
same.
that Kadas was a better choice in infusing the name, because it is also an English word
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
sounds better than compa. If people wonder what is compa, I mean,
yeah.
you know.
And then,
So and then when we had these both records released the same day with the same promotion, you know what? The Creole one, the Cadence one became an instant hit.
it.
All about. It was close to carnival time. We got phone calls because we remained in Paris for a while doing other gigs. That songs from the first album, Atatan, whatever, were on the road on carnival, and we had no choice but to follow and to understand what had happened in hindsight.
Yeah,
But it was not by design that we sat down with some intelligent plan.
yeah.
No, no, no.
Okay,
It
okay.
happened
So
by coincidence.
coincidence, accident, sheer luck, and being at the right time, at the right place, at the right time with the right tools.
That's it. That's it.
So did you realize soon after that that you had perhaps found a sweet spot that nobody in the Caribbean music sphere had realized or actually found, which was you could make music using the Haitian compa as arguably the main ingredient, but because you had a calypso background, you could make that music very much so danceable to, and therefore appealing to an audience which was far beyond the realm or the geographical boundaries of the Caribbean. Did you realize at that time how impactful the music that you had just invented, you guys had just invented, almost by trial and error, almost by accident, did you realize how impactful it was going to be, not only for you as a band, but also paving the way to other bands that they said, hold on a second, Gordon and Exile One found a formula here that we can replicate. And actually, you got a major, you were the first band to get a major record deal with Barclays in France, correct? So
That's
that
right.
paved the way to other people too. That paved the way to other people. Did you
Yeah,
realize how big that was?
including Kassav and all the others that followed. Um, the success of the first album was so huge in terms of sales and impact and penetrating new markets. We were very, very surprised. We were happy because everyone would welcome success, but we were very surprised. But what surprised me in particular most is Debs immediately summoned me to do a Creole album with this Cadence Lipso thing. And this album with songs like Akiaka and innovations like putting the wah-wah effect on the saxophone and that sort of thing. It was sold all over the world. I can remember being in New York City in the subway and seeing people selling the record. I can remember that it was pirated all over the place. The famous Billboard magazine of 1976, I think, July 1976, so I think that could be Googled, wrote an article on African music and included the sales of Exile One in France at the time being over 70,000 albums in France alone without radio and television, and that's only France.
Wow.
And the record, and this was on Debs, so which means in a matter of probably a month or two, we had two best-selling albums on the market, penetrating all kinds of markets. Colombia, Jamaica. Jamaica is an island that it is not very easy for small islands to penetrate in terms of record sales and that sort of thing. But Exile One did it repeatedly from this thing. So this opened. There's one guy, when we decided to add a horn section to Exile One, who we recruited in Waterloo, but he came all the way from Trinidad unannounced. But when I say unannounced, he wasn't invited. He heard Exile One and he decided he wanted to be a member of this band and came to Waterloo, and we auditioned him and we took him. His name is Frank Winfield, Frankie J. Yeah, so that was the impact. And then a movement began. Now, we didn't start the movement. The movement began because people, mainly in Martinique and Guadeloupe, where the studios were located, didn't realize how this cadence calypso thing came about. So they thought it was Dominican music. Cadence calypso may be called Dominican music because it was started with Dominican musicians, but it began in the diaspora because we didn't want people to pelt us with tomatoes or eggs.
Yeah.
So it is not a musical pattern of the island of Dominica, which was exported.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
But
no, that's clear.
Since the producers and the dance promoters didn't know that, and Exile One was new, because we recorded in November 1973, and by January 1974, Cadence Calypso was born. So people didn't have the time to know that story about how it began in Paris, France. So all producers went to Dominica and got scores and scores of musicians from Dominica and told them, well, you have to give me a record. But those guys had never heard themselves of Cadence Calypso. So they said, well, you just play. So they came playing their funk and their reggae like we did, and said, no, we don't want that. Play like this.
Yes.
Now, there is something about Exile One, that Exile One, the musicians were at the time very gifted, in my opinion. I might be biased, but very gifted musicians, and loved different types of music. So everyone didn't particularly cling to the same type of music. So this is why Exile One, in its cadence calypso, I think in a conversation we had, you asked me why the songs are so varied in approach and style. Some are slow, some are this, some are that. So it reflected the musical moods of the various musicians in the band. And the audience seemed to love variety.
Variety. A big, there was a breadth of taste in the music that you made. I just want to give some context to what Gordon asked. During the week when I was preparing for the interview, I was listening to some Cadence Calypso songs, and Gordon sent me a few links. I got a few songs, and to me, I couldn't really find a specific pattern in all of them, because some were faster, some were slower, some were, you know, so like we could go to a kizomba party and then some of the songs, and some were very romantic, very mellow. So I asked Gordon to kind of help me understand and say, is this all cadence calypso? And he said yes. And the mood, you know, the audience and etc. will dictate, you know. So basically, cadence calypso is a music genre that you can tell has a very broad spectrum, if you will, and it can go fast tempo to slow tempo and in between. So for me, that was very, very enlightening, because often for us who are not musicians and understand music from a very superficial standpoint, we usually associate, we give labels to music genre based purely on tempo. Oh, if this is fast, it must be zouk beton. If this is slow, must be zouk love. If this is this BPM, it must be kizomba. If it is this high BPM, then it's something else. And Gordon just helped me understand that, you know, you can fluctuate in between, you know, those two extremes, and it still be within exactly the same music genre. One question which I thought was very interesting from Rabil, who's based in Belgium, he asked, what is the first official cadence calypso song for the fans of history? What is the first official cadence calypso song?
Well, we can speak about the first official album. Because the album, which contained Jamais voir ça, Atata, Tire Bitelasa, it's a self-titled album. So Exile One. So this is the first official cadence calypso album.
Okay. So
we could note that from that album, a song titled Jamais voir ça was translated into Portuguese in Brazil.
Yes.
By a guy called Carlos Santos.
Santos, yeah.
Yeah, he changed the title to Quero Você. I don't think my pronunciation is good.
It's correct. It's correct, yeah.
So Dutch. And I on YouTube, well, that guy boasts having sold over 3 million copies, and I noticed on YouTube that there are at least 11 different versions of that. So this demonstrates the extent of how this combination, but the song Quero Você itself, in the dosage of the ingredients between calypso and cadence, it is more calypso than cadence.
Understood. And that brings the next question, which I have, you know, often, at least from an African music perspective, often we don't, you use a very good word, which for me, I thought about it the whole week, dosage of ingredients, very good expression. And we do the same with African music, and in particular with kizomba music. There's different dosage of different instruments, which will impart a different energy to the song. Whether I want the people to dance more or want to listen more to this song, then the musician will play with the dosage, like he's making a dish. So did you guys, and we don't, musicians here tend to be just like, you know, the guys that formed Exile One with you, very versatile. So they can play with the dosage, and a lot of the times it's so ingrained in their mind that they don't necessarily stop to write it down, put it in somewhat of a document, so that then people can replicate for generations and generations. Did you guys have that conscious of saying, if I want to make cadence calypso more on this side of the spectrum, this is the dosage, this is the recipe that I gotta follow? Or if I want to make more on this side of the spectrum, then the recipe changes like this. Did you guys make that concerted effort to document and freeze the formulae to make cadence lipso?
I love your questions. In our case, we were like in a laboratory, because the way you formulate your question, I see that you're a young man thinking in new technological terms. Our laboratory was the dance hall. So we played dances, we played in the clubs. So when we would come with a new song, we would notice by the reaction of the audience what is more appealing. You understand?
Yes.
So our laboratory was not in front of a computer. It was all live.
Live. So the audience was your barometer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Understood. Okay.
And then we went to the recording studio, and we know exactly how to arrange the song, you know, with a certain logic at what time we could manipulate the audience based on the experimentations that took place before going to the studio.
Okay. 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 You had to move, you and your brilliant colleagues at Exile One, you had to move, you guys actually moved to France. Was that a strategic move because you felt like maybe with the market or the opportunities or maybe the technology or the network among producers was limited in the Caribbean? Was it a commercial drive to move to France?
No, we were invited to France to sign a record company contract. When we had these two, probably even 3 albums, because Debs was moving at an exceedingly quick rate, we released albums very quickly. We got 2 offers to be signed with Philips at the time, which was considered a large record company in Europe, and Barclay. But Barclay, well, 2 things happened. My preference was with Philips because Philips was a much larger and international company, and they were somewhat like Sony today, you know, having an entertainment thing, but they also made television sets and radio. I don't know, probably you're too young to know about Philips or and that sort of
not
thing.
That young, I guarantee you, not that young.
So but something strange happened when we came to France to sign the contract. They kidnapped the CEO of Philips, and he remained kidnapped for about 2 weeks, and we couldn't wait, and we went with Barclay. But in France, Barclay was the thing, because the man himself, Eddie Barclay, is the one who brought the vinyl records to France. And he was a very flamboyant man who got married 8 or 9 times to some of the leading models of the world. And this is something which particularly, I speak for myself, I thought, what a wonderful playboy to emulate.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I only got married once. But at the time I was impressed, and the company being signed with Barclay, because many groups got distributed by Barclay, but we were signed with Barclay, bona fide artists having all their studios and whatever, being put on television at a time when there were almost no blacks on television. So that was what brought us to France and kept us in France.
Okay. On that note, did you guys ever felt like by staying in France and living in France, you know, living in the West, that perhaps at some point you could lose the essence, your Caribbean essence as musicians? Were you guys ever, you know, I'm sure you guys kept in touch, you know, with the culture, you know, the very strong and large community, immigrant community from Caribbean, French side of Caribbean or French overseas territory in France. So I'm not necessarily, pertaining to me, food and stuff like that. But, there's certain things that you can only feel home. And by being now based in France, do you guys ever either felt that, or maybe was anybody that may have accused implicitly or explicitly that because you guys were now in Europe, your music no longer have that essence of the Caribbean spice that you had when you're back home?
No, being based in France didn't affect us at all because we toured considerably. So we were constantly in all the islands of the Caribbean, some islands of the Indian Ocean, Africa, and for example, we had never visited Haiti before we went to Berkeley. Berkeley, for some reason, well, I know what the reason is. Berkeley had distributed a song of Taboo Combo called New York City that became a #1 hit all over Europe, New York City. And I think Haiti at the time, Duvalier's Haiti, made him an ambassador. So he was some kind of an ambassador, and this is the way that we were invited to Haiti. And we spent 2 months the first time in Haiti performing from one end to the other. I like to say from Cap to Kai, which are cities on both extremities of the country. Yeah. And so we kept in touch. And although we performed a lot in Europe to, let's say, white audiences, but we were presented mainly as a form of an exotic feature.
Okay.
And it was never taken. I can remember having arguments with journalists, particularly in Belgium and Germany, who found it abnormal that we played guitars and trumpets and so on. They thought that we had to be authentic, meaning that they expected us to be dressed in straw skirts and hitting drums and that sort of thing. And so, and this is what really made me think that in terms of trade, cultural industry, I am more interested, I have been more interested in consolidating what I like to call the Creole market, but the name might not be suitable because it includes Africa, it includes, I can't find a better marketing term. The world music thing was not too precise.
Yes, yes.
But I figure you understand that market, which I think is a very important market. I prefer to concentrate on that market than the famous crossover to mainstream.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree. As far as instruments, I want to touch quickly on the part of instruments. So you had Frankie J, who knew all the way from that the horn section. What did you guys add that wasn't present in Cadence or Compas Direct, if you will, that you guys added? I know you added a specific piano. You had the horn section brought by Frankie J. What did you guys do along the years that made Cadence Lipso, from a purely music standpoint, music instrumentation standpoint, I should say, different from Cadence Rampa? Because now you're deviating and you're creating almost your own music genre, standalone with its own identity. Yes, drawing a lot from music, but now with its own identity and carving its own path. What instruments did you guys add along the way that were instrumental to make it unique, if you will?
I don't think we added anything unique, but we were innovative in terms of getting the new instruments, because we started as a straight out electric band. So I'm trying to think in terms of acoustic, you know, like acoustic piano and cello bass and that sort of thing. We didn't do that. We were an electric band. And then new electronic instruments started to emerge. The synthesizer, the electric piano, that sort of thing. And well, we traveled a lot. We were always in New York City, Manny's and Samash and these music stores. We bought the best and the newest of, so we introduced everything that was new in terms of the electric and electronic. Okay. And what we didn't do, because it came later, and this is where Kassav comes in, is the numeric, the digital came about. So digital technology in music is the bridge from Seka Danslypso to Zouk. With regards to Haitian music, Haiti, when I discovered Haitian music on the dance floor with Le Viking, the big bands that toured Martinique, Guadeloupe, French Guiana were, well, I said, there were big bands with, I don't know, probably 19, 20 musicians, horns, sitting down, sometimes standing up. There were orchestras. And probably a decade after, they started having small groups that in the English islands we called combos. There were no horns.
Yeah.
So it was a period when the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and that sort of thing, there were mainly groups. And in Haiti, they call them mini jazz for some reason. So the New York City hit of Taboo Combo was in their mini jazz period. Exile One was, say, a mini jazz with horns. So we were not 18, 19, 20, we were still 7.
Yeah.
And that was a novelty in the transition of the evolution of band formation at the time. So when we went to Haiti and we spent 2 months inundating Haiti with our music and our format, almost all the mini jazz, including Taboo Combo, had to include horns. So that's like our contribution.
Okay, so you were distinct from that perspective. So you spoke about Zouk and how Zouk benefited or perhaps took, you know, a great advantage from the digital era. Kizomba as a music genre also started to take shape mainly with the synthesizer. Okay, the synthesizer and technological innovation, the electric instruments really is what Kizomba tried to making Kizomba as a music genre gain its own identity, drawing from Caribbean rhythms, compas direct, also from Zouk, of course. So Pierre-Edouard Decimus was with you, was also a member of Viking. He then in late 70s, he decides to go and form Kassav. But the first album of Kassav is recorded under your Soul Tone Records. correct? Can you explain how that story was? Was it an approach, deliberate approach to work with you in the first album based on your previous rapport with Pierre-Edouard?
Well, I always kept close contact with everyone from Viking,
Okay.
including Pierre-Edouard. But when I set up my own label, Soul Tone, it was based in Paris, France, and Soul Tone had a branch office, so to speak, in Waterloo. And that branch office was managed by a musician, a cultural icon, I would call him, called Freddie Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And Freddie Marshall decided, Freddie Marshall is a great lover of carnival and carnival music and the cultural aspect within the carnival sphere. So Freddie told me that he was interested in producing, he was still manager of Soul Tone, he was interested in producing an album with Pierre-Edouard.
Okay.
So I suggested to him that he could do it on his label, because if he did it on his label, it would be distributed through our network and everything. So that's like giving him his independence or autonomy, more or less, within the structure. And he did that album. So the first album, the label is in fact FM Production, which is Freddie Marshall Production. And if you notice, there's no Zouk. When Kassav started, and I think in general, that's how music evolves. The anthropology of societal development, I don't think it's done in a lab and we plan we're going to do it like this, we're going to do it like that. The first album, people can, it's available on YouTube and Discogs and all that sort of thing. There's a nude woman sitting on a drum on the jacket, and it is carnival, modern carnival, or modernized carnival music. You know, for example, if the carnival music is doom 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 doom, because it's all about jumping, but they would add a kind of American aspects of it. Doom doom chak doom doom chak doom 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 chak. You know, it's a kind of mix. It's almost like what Afrobeat was in the days of Fela Ransom. It's African, but it's a little funky and so on. It took 40, 50 years. I noticed that it's taking over America, but it's all the idea of putting things together. That didn't work. Kassav became big when two things happened. When they took complete control of the new technology in terms, particularly in terms of recordings, and they included some more Haiti into what they began. And what I'm saying is easily verifiable. Listen to the first album and listen to the evolution. Even the singers, there is one singer called Mateli, who did considerable work with even Haitians, because because the vocal style. The vocal style. And this is something that probably explains a little bit of my longevity in the business is because not too long ago in November, I had a concert. While I am for fusion and synthesis, in terms of my vocal style, I still want, if there's something I want to maintain, is my vocal style. Because every genre, every country, every culture, we all have our accents. You know, and I, when I speak French, I don't speak like a metropolitan French person.
Uh-huh.
I, even without effort, when I speak English, you can see that I don't try to sound like an Englishman or an American. You know, I try to speak, I do the same thing with my vocal style.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
So Zouk only became the phenomenon that then took over, many parts of the world, and of course Africa also was one of them. They toured Africa in the 80s, and everybody was in love with the music. So there's definitely a correlation there, the same way. And I think maybe one of the key learnings here that I'm gathering, and I hope the audience is also gathering, is how much Haitian music was influential in the whole region, and also in the genesis of so many music genres or subgenres, if you will. The cadence lipso of you, Zouk also benefited from Haitian music. So I think you went to Haiti, and I think you actually wrote a song about Haitian history, correct, in late 70s.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And so maybe, you can spend half a minute or so talking about, um, paying a tribute, if you will, to Haitian, because a lot of times I think they don't get the recognition that their music probably deserves. They are kind of the stepchild, if you will, for lack of a better word, compared to Zouk, perhaps even to Cadence Lipso. So, have you done anything deliberately, on purpose to try to highlight, whether it's in your books, whether it's in your talks, to highlight their importance? Because you've never shied away. Even when I was asking you a few questions during the week, you never had any problem in acknowledging that Haitian music, was instrumental in the genesis of your Cadence Lipso.
Well, anyone who takes a close look from a musicological standpoint on the development of Caribbean music cannot escape the enormous contribution of Haitian music. Now, Haitian music is very varied and in many different aspects. For example, when I was a boy, there was a Caribbean song that sounds like a Caribbean ballad called Yellow Bird. I don't know if you've heard this song.
No.
Yellow bird, whatever under the tree. It became a hit in the United States in English. After I discovered that that was called Shukun, it's or Tizoiseau, little bird. If you translate the Tizoiseau, it's a Haitian song written by a Haitian and everything. What I think happened, another thing is, it is a very strange historical fact for a president of a country to summon two musicians and tell them, I would like you to create a national genre. I've never heard of that anywhere else on this planet. Okay, when you listen to what they came up with, Cadence Rampa and Compas Direct, you can see from where they sourced their inspiration. That would take another discussion.
Yes.
We can see, but they did it successfully.
By the two musicians, are you referring to Herbert Sicorde and Jean-Baptiste Nemo?
Yes.
Okay.
Because they were summoned by Duvalier to create And they did. The other thing is, because you asked me, Haitian music, while it was, when I visited Guadeloupe and Martinique and French Guyana, it was 75, 80% of the dance music of the time. It still is, despite Zouk. It was not in the English-speaking Caribbean. Because remember, I told you I discovered that music when I went to Waterloo. So in the English-speaking Caribbean, but this compa thing creeps on people. I brought Taboo Combo personally. I brought Taboo Combo to Dominica. That might have been their first tour to an English-speaking island. And it was in 1980, after a 1979 Hurricane David that had devastated Dominica. And it was the biggest concert on that island at the time.
Wow.
And from then, the English speaking, and I noticed that in Trinidad, just about a week ago, I was listening to some of the 2022 soca. And trust me, if you listen to it, the compa has made its way
Wow.
into it.
It's strong, huh?
So the political situation in Haiti has been a serious drawback. I remember speaking to members of Taboo Combo who were not members of any copyright society. They knew about copyright protection, but they didn't have it. I don't know what's the situation now. So the political situation in Haiti has been a drawback to the music.
Okay. Did you feel like when Zouk take over, because it kind of became a monster of its own, did you feel like it started then, because Zouk was so successful overseas, became so big, and almost, you know, perhaps accidentally or not, became, you know, to some extent, somewhat of a, for people from outside of the Caribbean, every time they thought of the Caribbean music, they would immediately associate, you know, maybe 5, 6, 7 out of 10 people, oh, Caribbean music must be Zouk, right? And then the cadence rampa, you know, the pure Asian compa, the cadence calypso, to some extent, did you feel like it's starting to even begin, for instance, Goka? Do you feel like these music genres, which were there way before Zouk, very strong throughout all those islands, did you feel like they kind of took a second place to Zouk to some extent, and therefore almost everybody, I don't know, I want you to answer, to tell me yes or no, everybody started to kind of model the music, shape the music to be Zouk-like in order to achieve the same level of success. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, to a certain extent, it's a fair statement, but it is necessary that we put the music into two distinct categories. Goka and Belay and whatever, we need to leave them in a category called traditional music. Traditional music defined as music that came from Africa, and we try to preserve as is forever. So there's no evolution to that type of music. Then we have the pop music of the Creole speaking islands, because Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, while some people might love Zouk, but they don't identify with Zouk as their music. Okay? And Zouk set the bar so high in terms of craftsmanship, in terms of record quality, in terms of the level of live performances, in terms of the type of budgets, way ahead of everyone else, that they took a supreme position that even 40, almost 50 years after, that there is no number 2 or number 3 or number 4 or no number 5. They occupy. And probably the death of members, it may be the only thing that may erode. Another thing is the people of Martinique and Guadeloupe who consider this as their music, because it is the first time in the history of these islands that they could proudly say that this is our music.
Yeah.
So much so that what you mentioned earlier about Zouk Beton and Zouk Love and all of this,
Yes.
to me, and this is something, a critique, not a criticism, that I have brought on soca music, is when people love great contributions. This is why I promote Cadence Calypso as a genre of the 70s. It is not modern 2022 music. When we have music genres that stay beyond a decade, a generation, and like in the case of Zouk, there are a few negatives that are attached to it. One of the negatives is they start bringing it from slow to fast to medium and naming each change of tempo as if it were an innovation. If you look at the history of Caribbean music, pop music, popular music, there's always been, you check all the records, always been slow, medium, moderate, fast. Because in the case of soca, they call the slow one groovy, and the fast one, I forgot how they find some name to call the fast one. So this to me is a demonstration of a certain type of stagnation. When you see the progressive music forms of the Caribbean, like reggae, distinct change. Reggae went through an evolution where they changed the names. I grew up listening to ska, then it went to rock steady, then it went to reggae, went to dancehall, and it keeps evolving, and the style changes, the name changes. Compa itself, when you listen to Robert Siko and you listen to Karimi, it's not the same. They kept the name, but you can see, and you know, so it's not this compa and that compa. So that's why I say it's not a criticism, but to me, it's a critique that can be argued that music that will stay 40, 50 years around by slowing it down or quickening it up is not evolution.
Okay. No, that's a very powerful point. I think what I'm gathering from this discussion, Gordon, is that we have so much to talk about, just on the musicology standpoint, which I believe we need to bring you back to a different forum and maybe structure something, because there's an enormous interest from people who are Kizomba fans and aficionados and love the music and the dance, because in our Kizomba parties, we consume and we dance a lot of your music, a lot of the Caribbean music. Like here in Angola, you will be surprised how many times Fresh is played at parties. You will be shocked how Exile One or Exile One songs are played here to this day, right? Despite Zouk, despite the Kasabs and so on. So I think, you know, in the best interest of time, we need to bring you back different forum and having a discussion more on the music standpoint, the music history. Thank you. I think one of the things that was very clear to me is the timeline of how, you know, we went from Cadence Rampa to Cadence Lipso, and then when Zouk came along. And I think at some point we need to have a discussion where we can dissect, you know, the main differences, what was added here. You mentioned a very good point. You know, the first album from Kassav was not Zouk. Once they started adding the Asian flavor, is then it eventually became Zouk. So I think it's worthwhile setting up different discussions with you. We'll touch base offline. For the people watching, this is something that we really want to do, which is make people understand, you know, the history of all these music genres and how they all correlated. Maybe I can bring somebody who understands Kizomba from a music standpoint, and how Kizomba, what Kizomba actually stole, for lack of a better word, or drew from Zouk. For instance, I once asked a guy who played the percussion in Kizomba songs, and he said, "Oh, I asked him, can you show me how the Kizomba percussion is?" And he said, "Rui, you're gonna get me in trouble, because if I were to be honest, the Kizomba percussion is just Zouk. You know, you can call it whatever, but it's stolen from Zouk." So I think I can bring somebody from this side and have a discussion with people like you who are walking encyclopedias of Caribbean music. I just want to ask you one quick question. You've been to Africa. What did you feel when you visited some of the African countries, especially for the first time?
Well, I felt at home, except in the cities, because the cities of most of the countries in Africa I visited are much more developed than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
The image of Africa I had was what I saw in the movies and the news and so on. So I felt very much at home in a number of countries, because I've visited probably 9 or 10 different countries in across Africa, and it's very much like Dominica and most of the other Caribbean countries. The only thing is, I am aware of the tribal rooted society. So I often used to ask people, when you look at me, because I noticed people would just look at people in different African countries and tell them, you're from this tribe, you're from that tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask people, well, what tribe am I? Do you think I'm from? So some, from politeness, would give me some tribe. It's always different from one from the other. And I stopped asking that question when some guy in Cameroon told me, "You're not from any tribe." So I understood the whole dynamic of the diaspora. You know, it's like a French guy going to French Canada, Montreal, and over centuries, he has become a Canadian. So I know that I'm of African descent, but I am a Caribbean man.
But I need to send you, when I was looking at your videos, I shared a video this week of Exile One, and you still had, you know, the long hair and stuff.
Could you believe it? I once had hair.
I know someone here in Angola who looks just like you when you had hair, and the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, he looks eerily like you. The way he speaks, the intonation, just like you. So I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere you were from this part, you know, your ancestors came from this particular part of the continent. Let me see if there's any questions here from the audience. I have one more for you, which is, do you feel like um, a lot of times for us African musicians, they had to have some sort of fusion, add some sort of Western slash European flavor to the music in order to be successful and reach, global audience and, be financially wealthy or sell records. Do you feel like if Caribbean music had remained purely or very loyal, if you will, or very close to its, pure African roots, do you think it would reach anywhere outside of the Caribbean if you're not headed or drunk from the influences of also other music genres from other parts of the world? I know
I
it's a very
think
unfair question.
I think that this is more about marketing than about art.
Okay, that's
And
fair.
you notice I like to use culinary expressions to describe music. Um, in the Caribbean, we invented something called rum, the drink rum. Now, Caribbean people can drink rum pure. It's very fashionable now. Nowadays, I notice in the United States, people take shots of tequila, shots.
Yeah.
Caribbean people can drink rum by shots. Now, if you want to sell rum to Europeans and even to the large majority of Americans, they cannot support the rum. It's too harsh for them.
Yeah.
So what you do is you make cocktails like a planter's punch. You add a concoction of fruit juices and so on, and that's how you can sell the rum. So similarly with the music in its pure stage appeals to the people who can relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want, it's a matter of choice. If you want to be an artist who is an ambassador of your culture, but you might still end up wanting to colonize people with your culture,
Mm-hmm.
it's a matter of choice.
Yeah.
But most people would like to put some orange juice and whatever into their rum music so it becomes palatable
Yeah.
to other tastes.
That is a great analogy. Thank you, guys. I will not keep you any longer from your beautiful wife, Shannon. I promised that I was going to keep this to as close to an hour and a half. It's a Saturday. It's a Saturday evening, so I won't take much of your time. Gordon will definitely bring you back. Maybe, as I said, it's a different forum. It's fascinating your body of knowledge. I mean, you are part of Caribbean history, music history, and we need to bring you back and start dissecting these things in even a different level of detail. The last thing that I'm going to ask you, this was coming. Fresh is my favorite Exile One song. So before you go, I'll say, of course, thank you to the guys here in the studio, Illusion Media. Always have my back, always make sure everything runs smoothly. Thank you for the people watching from home. I hope this was informative and I hope this was entertaining. There's so much that I learned from this discussion. DJ Vasco is gonna be right after we finish the interview for the after party, so you guys can continue to enjoy this amazing breath of Caribbean music. He's gonna play everything. So Gordon, I have no words to thank you. You were extremely approachable from the very beginning. I swear, when I first contacted you, I did not have any expectation that you're going to actually, one, answer, and two, actually be willing to participate in a session like this. So thank you so much for your time, for your generosity of being here and giving us almost 2 hours of your time on a Saturday night to talk about all the stuff that we spoke to. So thank you very much. And yes,
Well,
We are going to have you finish this with fresh. I promise you.
okay. Before I sing you a little bit
Uh-huh.
of fresh, I really want to thank you. Thanks for having me. I think this is a significant conversation that we've had because it's like 360. I mean, for years, I've been looking forward to having a constructive conversation on that 360, that return, particularly on the music side of things. Um, Thanks a lot. And I'm really looking forward to doing some kind of work with you, because I know, because I get messages all the time from people asking questions, sometimes linked to musicology, sometimes a little bit more academic, more from an anthropological standpoint. I am really looking forward, and particularly in the artistic way, because you mentioned a percussionist. We can demonstrate in simple ways how one genre emerged from the other and some of the societal traits and that sort of thing. We can do that.
Yes,
Si
definitely.
muerte oriental te que well, habillé en kimono. Yeah. Et si muerte hollandais te que well, agir avec beau sabot. Ooh. Aïe, aïe, ou cabot moi, ils sont encore à moi. Aïe, aïe, garde pour le poids de louer. Aïe, ou qu'à admettre moi car mon fou. Aïe, 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 aïe,
You still got it, man.
fresh.
You,
See you sometime, buddy.
you still got it, man. You still got it. All right, man. Thank you so much, and thanks Shannon for us for keeping you for lending you to us for the past 2 hours. Yeah. Thanks a lot, man.
Will do.
Appreciate it.
One
All right,
love,
thank
baby.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Illusion Media. You guys are the best, man. You guys are the best. All right, guys. We'll have DJ Vasco with the after party. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being with us. And hopefully you guys learn